Q1 GDP data for FY25 has moderated to a 5 quarter low at 6.7%. Now, if we compare this to the data that came in on Q1 FY24, which was at 8.2%, that is a comparison as far as the same quarter last year is concerned. If we compare it to the previous quarter, the data had come in at 7.8%, which is Q4 FY24. So, for all our viewers to understand, Q1 GDP data has moderated to a 5 quarter low at 6.7%. What really has led to the decline? When we were seeing the broad highlights, we saw that agriculture has weakened, government expenditure has weakened, and we've seen that manufacturing and construction really have seen a strong uptick. But what really are the key reasons for this sharp decline? To decode this, I'm joined by Mitali Nikor, senior economist, Sanchita Mukherjee, senior business economist. Thank you both for your time. First, what really is do you make of the data? Is this on expected lines? Are you disappointed? To you first, Sanchita.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sakshi. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. For me, it was on expected lines because I feel in India, every quarter, every month, there's so much of an upgrade to the GDP quarter on quarter by every forecaster in town, right? But having said that, let's understand this quarter specifically was a unique quarter because it also encompassed the Lok Sabha elections. Typically, in an election quarter, the government spending, government expenditure is a bit subdued, and that's taken for as a given, right? So that would have an impact because if you were to analyze the entire last year, and a couple of years even prior to that, what we are struggling with as an economy. Firstly, the good news is India still remains to be the brightest economic spot globally. Our global growth as a GDP as a country is very strong. Our GVA is very strong. China is growing at a 4.7%. Most of the developed markets, developed economies are struggling with very unique issues. India is a very large economy, very diversified economy. We have a demographic dividend which is very strong. So that's a good news. Now, coming back to the not so good news is the fact which remains that agriculture is in doldrums. The reading on agriculture has come to be way below of the mark. Now, why is that happening? Is because quarter on quarter, year on year, if you were to see, there is very little effective utilization of resources done in a very productive manner. We are contingent to the vagaries of the monsoons every quarter. This quarter specifically, there was an immense heat wave, so which did affect agricultural output to a very large extent, right? So we need to analyze how we are allocating resources, how we are going about with infrastructure specifically addressed to agriculture. On manufacturing front, if you were to see, the government has done a phenomenal job in terms of the PLI schemes, the production linked incentive per sector, which has come about, the China plus one policy push, which has made Make in India quite effective. We have come across as the factory to the world as an option. But this window will not stay open for too long. We need to understand that as a country, because once China bounces back, we might not have that option. So it's very important that the government focuses even further on this and addresses the labor law and the land reforms, which we have so far not addressed as a country. Because 85% of our workforce is still there in agriculture, which is not that big a productive sector if one were to look at it. So why is that happening? Why can't we make labor more effectively available to manufacturing so that private factories can be put up? Thirdly, the consumption is a bit of an issue because rural consumption has been very slow for many quarters, given that monsoons have been very uneven. Sometimes there's a flood at other regions of India, there's a drought, very uneven monsoon dispersion. Hence, rural consumption has been very slow. Now we are seeing a lot of
Right.
slowness, which has crept up even in urban consumption. So, how do you spur private companies to invest unless they see that kind of demand? So, job creation, unemployment, these are things government needs to look at so that urban consumption remains intact, along with the
Right.
manufacturing infrastructure.
All right. And Mitali, your first thoughts. Disappointing or in line with expectations? Of course, we're hearing mixed views at the moment. Your first thoughts.
Thanks, Sakshi, for bringing me in. And of course, I'm always mostly in agreement with Sanchita's point, so this is no difference. But I think headline numbers wise, this is in line with expectations. We were expecting a range of 6.6 to 7, for this quarter, and this is a little bit on the lower side, but headline numbers are within the range. But what is definitely concerning to me as as an analyst, and which I have been looking at the numbers, is the slowdown at a sectoral level within agriculture has been quite sharp. It's a reduction from a 3.7 growth to a 2.0 kind of growth. And post covid, agriculture has been a very resilient sector for the economy, given of course that it employs a large proportion of the population, and also a large proportion of women in the population employed in the agriculture sector. So therefore it becomes a very important source of livelihood for a large section of our population. And looking at that, this 2% growth is concerning, because of course heat waves have contributed, but floods have also contributed, droughts have also contributed, and all of these climatic events are only going to keep increasing. So we need to see a strategy around agriculture where we invest in climate resilient infrastructure, we invest in irrigation infrastructure. Even today, two-thirds of the districts of the country are not covered by the irrigation system. So we really need to see more and more investment going in there. And then we need to look at innovation, like high yielding variety of seeds, drought resistant seeds, which can come into these come into the sector, incentivized and deployed across the country. But the other point that I want to make is also around manufacturing and services. So of course we've noted that the increase in manufacturing is very encouraging. It's increased from a 5% growth to a 7% growth, and construction sector also going from an 8% to a 10%, 10.5% growth in fact. But when you look at the subsectors, steel doing very well, cement absolutely flat. And that's again concerning, because why is it that a leading sector like cement should be so flat in a full quarter? It of course coincides with the election, and the fact that decision making, especially around construction projects, slows down during elections. But it could also be a portender of what is happening in the real estate space. So again, something to watch out for, something for the government to look at and consult with cement companies. And the other point is around passenger traffic, which is a very good indicator of consumption and the buoyancy of consumption. There we are seeing a slowdown in both the air traffic and the rail traffic. So again it indicates the consumption slowdown both in urban and rural segments. So we really need to look at how can we make the consumption easier for the Indian consumer. And for doing that, of course, a rate cut, looking at monetary measures might be the answer.
Right. So the rate cut may be an answer, land labor reforms may be the answer. And like you said, focus areas that you all have talked about, specific sectors really that need attention and need attention soon so that India can continue to outperform in the global economy. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and, of course, decoding this GDP data for our viewers.